I was lied to. I was told Terminator Genisys was a bad movie. I went into this movie expecting a train wreck. It's not. Terminator Genisys is... It's not amazing, but it's sort of a good movie. I had a good time. I don't know why it has this reputation for being an awful movie. Perhaps because I watched it on a relatively small screen, and people who watched maybe the CGI effects in the cinema on the big screen, maybe that would have given them a worse experience. But I don't understand all the hate. So, welcome to Lazy Views. Today we're gonna talk about Terminator Genisys from 2015, the 5th installment in the Terminator franchise. If you've seen my video on Terminator Salvation, well, I apologize, I really didn't do a great job with that video. Well, it wasn't only my fault, there were a lot of copyright issues, but if you've seen my video on Terminator Salvation, you know that we ended the franchise, the 4th installment of the franchise, on a sour note. A film that really didn't do the future war justice, that really had a really odd reinterpretation of the future war, and aside from that had a lot of plot issues and just a lot of other issues with it, but not a complete disaster. It has some nice ideas for the Skynet units and everything. I didn't completely hate it, but I was worried where the franchise would go. I knew we would not continue the future war, even though there is sort of a cliffhanger at the end of that film that could hint that would be where they would be going next, but that's not the direction they went with. Instead, they did what the Terminator franchise has done so many times before, and at this point is quite famous for. They reinvented itself by creating a new diverging timeline, because this franchise has a lot of parallel universes, a lot of parallel timelines. It can be quite difficult to keep a track of what's going on and when it's going on and what's canon and what's not canon. I think actually all of it is canon, but then we just have parallel universes. That's why everything is canon and nothing is canon at the same time. This film actually even comments on it, that it's not that complicated to keep a track on parallel universes and different timelines. You just need to have two different narratives, two different storylines in your head at the same time and keep a track of both of them at the same time, because both are somehow true and interconnected. I think that's a decent way to look at this franchise, although it would be so much easier if it's only complete parallel universes, where we can just say, this universe where you put this movie in, that sucks. That's not canon. Come on, that's not canon. That sucks. Let's get something better than that. So by that token, probably only the two first films are canon. I would be fine with that, but maybe I'll change my mind when we get into more Terminator content. So in this video, I'll first give you a short plot summary of Terminator Genisys, where I'll be highlighting some of the main plot points, but without really getting into spoiler territory. I'll then talk about the characters, the performances, then move into more special effects, CGI, filmography, sound design. I will then finally move in to highlight some points, world building, some of the decisions they made. That will, of course, have spoilers in it, so you can skip it if you want to. I will make sure to have those chapters, so you can pick whatever you want to see and whatever you want to skip. So if you want to skip the spoiler section, I will also have the conclusion. So as with the first 3 installments in the Terminator franchise, Terminator Genisys opens up in the future, showing us the future war. And right off the bat, this is quite possibly the best depiction of the future war we've had. I do very much enjoy the scenes in the first and the second film. They also created a lot of world building and a lot of tension about what's going on in the future, but this actually shows it in a much larger scale, which makes sense because a lot of it is done with CGI. All these ruined cities, it's all done with CGI. It does portray the resistance struggle in a fairly realistic light, where it makes sense how they can take the fight to Skynet, how they're fighting them, how is this guerrilla warfare that really was lacking in Terminator Salvation. They are explaining a lot about how they're surviving, how they're fighting, how this war has been raging for all this time. It talks about how humans have been treated like this extermination camps and so on. There are some things it still doesn't really go into too much, such as what Skynet wants for this future, what the rest of the world looks like. It's still pretty much just LA, but I don't really think it needs to explain that. It's fine to leave something up to the imagination, and in this case it doesn't really ruin the world building, unlike Terminator Salvation, where it really had a disastrous impact on it, I would argue. Here it doesn't matter too much that it doesn't give you all those explanations, although the film does end up being much more about the motivations of Skynet, which is something I'll not be talking too much about because it's not very interesting and it really doesn't work too well for the film, and it also would be going into a lot of spoilers, so we'll only mention it a bit later, but not really here. Just know that the beginning here, where we see the future war, it is visually quite decent. The story is narrated this time not by John Connor, but by Kyle Reese, who talks about his childhood in this future and how he's brought in under the wings of the Resistance and then becomes a leading member of the Resistance. And one thing I do like about how it tells the story is actually, in the other films it has been a bit confusing. Is the main target in San Francisco? Is it the core? Where are all these different facilities? But here it does make a lot of sense that the core is in one place where if they disable that, all of Skynet will basically be shut off, go offline. Essentially the only way they can win, and it's established in the other movies, that's fine. And then there's another facility in LA where they have the time traveling device. The Resistance doesn't really know much about it. They only know that they need to stop it. It doesn't really matter if they can take out the core, because if the Skynet can still set some of these units that are apparently not connected to the core. They don't explain that, but I guess some of the more advanced units, like the T-800s, are not connected to the core. Well, a small plot hole there, but yeah, if they disconnect this, they can just go back in time and still kill Sarah Connor, and then it's all in vain. This future is in vain, because Skynet can then just have another timeline where it wins. John Connor is sent back in time. He's sent back to 1982. As he does, it's revealed that there is some new Terminator unit, some new Skynet unit among the Resistance members that corrupts John Connor in some way. We don't see how it happens. All we know is that when Kyle Reese goes back in time, something happens to him. And suddenly the future looks bleak. But does the past look bleak? And does the future look bleak because of the past? We don't know yet. All we know is that when he travels back in time, suddenly he starts seeing things. And what he's seeing is, I can spoil this, something that's revealed within the first 30, 40 minutes of the film. When you go back in time and you thereby alter the future, you also have memories from the other life you've lived. So Kyle Reese throughout this film has memories and knowledge from growing up after the future war and from having a completely normal childhood in the 2010s. And that is a bit confusing when you first see it. Also, the way it's revealed, the way it's visualized is not great, and there are some of the ways where it is visualized that's not explained away at all, and it's quite awful. In the way it's executed, they could have done something better, but I think if they had to try to do this realistically to actually make it work, they would have just given it all away to begin with, and that's why they went some creative ways that are quite bad. The film has a lot of plot holes. It does have a lot of issues with its writing and with its presentation at times. It's not a perfect film, but I want to get to the good stuff and ignore the bad stuff for now. And we do get to some good stuff. I think also some of the stuff that the film has been criticized for quite a lot. The first 30, 40 minutes of the film are going through the stages of the first two Terminator movies. So some scenes are recreated more or less in their totality. So the first thing we see in the future is Arnold Schwarzenegger as a T-800, as a young T-800, teleporting back to 1982. The whole scene is recreated. He even meets the punks. And of course, the problem with doing this is they have to recast everyone, and they just don't capture the same magic as the original film. There's no Bill Paxton or anything, of course, but the scene is still sort of interesting, whereas you think that this might just be retreading all the steps from the previous movies, and that would be a really bad idea. No, it ups the ante, because out of the shadows comes an old T-800 model and fights the young T-800 model. So two Arnold Schwarzeneggers fighting. It's not really Clegane brawl, it's Arnold brawl. And I know this scene has been criticized. It's not the best fight scene in the film, but it looks okay. All the darkness hides the bad CGI a bit, and it's over even before it began, because the young T-800 model is taken out with a anti-material rifle, or whatever it's called, like one of those Beretta 50 cal things that can take out armored vehicles, and it destroys the T-800 model in one shot. That's one thing out of the picture. There's one risk taken care of, that suddenly Sarah Connor should be safe from this T-800 model. The next thing we see is then the classic scene with Kyle Reese having to get close off a homeless man. A police officer confronts him, and as the classic line is said, what date is it? The police officer
May 12th, 1984, the day you arrived.
And it turns out, oh shit! The police officer is a T-1000. His performance is not as good as the original T-1000 performance, but I do like it. I will put up the actor's name here. I think he's doing a good job as T-1000. He's a believable T-1000. And they have this chase throughout this department store. He encounters a police officer that survives, and he plays a role later in the film. And then right when both of them are about to die, in bursts a big truck, and Sarah Connor, of course, says, so come with me if you want to live, because someone has to say it in the film. She's played by Emilia Clarke. They drive off, and he's trying to understand, like, why do you know who I am? How do you know who I am? How do you know all these things? And she tells her story bit by bit, but I can just give you it here, that when she was a child, her home was blown to pieces, and she was saved by Arnold Schwarzenegger, a T-800 model, who's a T-800 model who is now older, but not obsolete, who fights the young T-800 model in the beginning, and who has a prominent role in the film where he's old but not obsolete. They have a chase scene, and they really pretty much knew exactly what would happen in the future, because they have the knowledge from the future to know what's going on to happen. in the past, but in their future. So they had prepared everything to take care of this T-1000 model. So 30 minutes into the film, you had the threat from the first Terminator film and the second Terminator film completely eliminated. And it kicks ass. The first 30-40 minutes of this movie they're minutes well spent. I think it's the first 40 minutes of the film. I will put in time codes, and the first 40 minutes are solid. I was really on board. There are some plot issues, there are some other issues that are worth emphasizing. I will right now not go into that, but I will talk about especially when it comes to the performances, because some of the characters are just not as good as the original movies. And when you do make sequels, especially sequels that are remaking the originals in a way, you cannot help but compare everything to the movies that inspired it, that is actually based on. That's what I will be doing when I talk about the characters. So at the end of these first good 40 minutes of the film, we do have them reveal that they have built a time traveling machine, and they have one shot at traveling to the correct time. Sarah Connor, of course, wants to go to 1997 to destroy Skynet, but Kyle Reese knows that that's not the right time, because he knows instinctively, because he has these double memories, that he had a childhood in 2017. So in 2017, Skynet has not yet launched. Through some different tactics, he has her convinced to go to 2017 instead. What about Arnold Schwarzenegger? Well, he has to stay back. He cannot travel with them because his arm has to heal from some acid that was dropped on it. That is pretty much the reason they give. I don't know if there's another reason. I didn't really understand if there was another reason for it. It's just that he needs time to heal, so he would be a detriment to them if he would travel with them. I think that's the point. And traveling into the future, there are some cool things already. And this point, of course, is the past, 2017. But traveling to 2017, there's some decisions I already like. They are teleporting, time traveling into the middle of a highway, into oncoming traffic, which is a decision that's quite interesting, and visually is also quite cool, and it does add to some of these ideas where you don't really control where you travel to. If you do time travel into a person burning him alive, or into a car completely destroying it, the film shows you that, and I do like that. I do like that scene, but this is where also the movie starts getting less stellar. And I cannot say much without spoiling it, but there are some issues already. For example, I said that the police officer from the past witnessed all of this happening in 1982 and realizes that this is a weird robot that has never been seen before. He's somehow really on board with time traveling happening again, and he seems to be like this crazy journalist. There are a lot of issues with the writing. I think it's directed by Alan Taylor. I forgot who wrote it. But whoever wrote this didn't deserve their money. This movie is not well written. There are a lot of plot issues, but that guy does have a semi-big role, and he's played by not Gene Simmons, the other Simmons. J.K. Simmons? No, that's not his name. He's played by Simmons. You know, I'll show you him. You know Simmons, not Gene Simmons, but the other Simmons. Plymouth Simmons? No. I should look up these names before, shooting. So when it comes to the characters and the performances, there's really one I want to highlight and one I want to talk about. But I'll say that for last. We'll start with Jay Courtney, who plays Kyle Reese. He's okay, nothing too spectacular about him. But with the original Kyle Reese, of course, there's some emotional range in that character. But he also wasn't the strongest part of the Terminator. The same can be said by Jay Courtney. He is doing an okay job. He is maybe a bit too pretty boy for someone who grew up in the future war. If there's some criticism I can have, it's him. Because when we see Jason Clarke, who plays John Connor, well, he's definitely marked by the future war, and Jay Courtney isn't. So I think they could maybe have picked a slightly less pretty face for the role. But aside from that, I don't have too much to say. It's not amazing. It's not bad. The same Jason Clarke as John Connor. He is definitely acting in the film. He's doing a lot of acting. I don't know if I like his acting, but he's definitely doing a lot of it. And I can actually see why they picked him. I can see why he sort of looks like Emilia Clarke. He looks like if Joffrey from Game of Thrones grew up but never developed an adult face. He doesn't really look like any of the other portrayals of John Connor. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, I really don't know if I like his performance, but he's really adding a lot to it. He's sort of chewing the scenery a bit, not too much, but a bit. He's fine in the film. I think it's the character that I might not like that much, because a lot of it is on set. I'll move into that a bit in the spoiler section. Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's not his best role, but to be honest, when was his last best role? He is actually kicking ass in the film. He is old, but not obsolete, and he gets older, but not obsoleter, because we see him, of course, in the future, in the 2017 future, and he is old. His skin ages as the T-800 model. But he has some good scenes. He is struggling with age as well, but still showing that he can kick ass, and he has some well-deserved scenes in the film. He's cool. I mean, it's the T-800 as Arnold Schwarzenegger. But what probably should talk about is in the second and third installment, a lot of it is how human is he? How many emotions has he developed? How much of a real personality is it? Is he just a robot with a purpose? I should say we don't know who sent him back in time. We don't know who programmed him to go back in time to save Sarah Connor in the past. That's not known. And actually, I will double check this, but I'm not even sure we know at the end of the film. The ending is not that good. I did zone out a bit, so I will do some correcting myself. But he has a good mix of humanity and ass-kickery and stoicism. I don't know if that's the right word to use for a robot, but he's quite unfeeling, even though he does show some compassion. Is his compassion or his communication a reflection of having lived among humans for so many years and just learned to understand how they communicate and adapt to it, or is it based on actually real emotions? Can machines feel? And Kyle Reese, of course, believes he can't, but Sarah Connor, who has grown up with him her whole life, spent her whole life with him, calls him daddy, he's a daddy figure for her. She thinks that, well, he definitely is human. He believes him as a person, not as a machine. And that is a dynamic that they do develop a lot in the film. I'm not sure if it's the strongest element of the film, but it's there, and it's almost always in the background. It sort of works well, and then some of the communication, some of the banter between him and Sarah Connor it made me laugh. I think I can understand why people would maybe hate this about the movie, but because we know that Kyle Reese is the father of John Connor, in order to give birth to John Connor and win the future war, Sarah Connor has to sleep with Kyle Reese. T-800 Arnold Schwarzenegger keeps telling her that she needs to sleep with him to get a child. Like the first and the second film, but primarily the first film, she wants a life of her own. She wants her own destiny. She wants to choose her own life. And of course, what has happened here is that she can't, because ever since her child, she's been prepped for the future she will see and the future she won't see. Basically, she has had her life stripped away from her. She's still only 19, but she's playing this role that has her life stripped away from her. As the film stresses, it's not just about sleeping with him. They also have to fall in love. It does add a lot of elements that could really have been well developed. But I do want to talk about Emilia Clarke's portrayal as Sarah Connor. That's where there are more issues with the film. It's that sad thing where you can't escape comparing her to Linda Hamilton. What you need to know is that they're two completely different people. They're of course still both 19, but Linda Hamilton plays a believable 19-year-old who is just this everyday girl who lands in the impossible situation and somehow overcomes them. And then in the second film, of course, she is a badass. But Sarah Connor in Genisys is a completely different person. She has already experienced all these things. She has already been hardened. She has already become the badass she is in Terminator 2. Her performance is not awful, but all the things she has to balance in her character, the writing around it is not good enough. And I think we've just seen the best way this, or at least in my opinion, probably the best way this can be performed in Linda Hamilton's portrayal as Sarah Connor in the first and second Terminator film, where she balances the whole creating your own destiny, believing the world might be doomed. All of this that they need to balance in Emilia Clarke's Sarah Connor character is just not balanced as well as Linda Hamilton, just because she's a bit too cool, a bit too smart-assy about it. Doesn't show vulnerabilities maybe in the way she should show vulnerabilities. She does convey the insecurity and the disbelief and the conflicted emotions, but it's just not. I didn't like it as much as Sarah Connor, and I think I just can't help but compare her to Sarah Connor. But I also understand how her character has to be different, since she experienced this at a much earlier age than Sarah Connor did in the first Terminator film. So they have to be different. I expect and respect that they have to be different. I was just not sold on her performance. They could really have done a lot with the character, and we know they could have done a lot with that character because we see it in Linda Hamilton in the first and second film. So with the characters covered and the performance covered, let's move into the CGI territory and talk about the effects and the cinematography. I think this is where a lot of people would not really like the movie that much. It is from 2015, and there is an over-reliance on CGI and virtually no practical effects, but I'm just so used to it by now. Yeah, I never liked this shift, but I'm used to it. CGI is not terrible. There are some quite cool scenes towards the end where there are helicopters being blown out of the sky, holes being blown into bridges, and yeah, it doesn't look physical, it doesn't look that believable, but it looks completely fine. If you judge it by the same merit as any other movie these days or in 2015, I don't think it stands out as bad. It just might be that we like the physicality of the first Terminator movies, and therefore we would expect it from the fifth installment, and we don't really get it. In terms of cinematography, we are back with the same lighting as the first two films for future scenes. The rest of it, the lighting is okay, the locations are decent. There's nothing really to pinpoint, nothing really that is either good or bad. It's just very basic, very rudimentary really. The same with the sound design. Nothing great about the sound design. No new rendition of the Terminator soundtrack that's worth emphasizing. It's quite okay. Everything here is quite okay. When you have this quite ordinary effects cinematography for scenes that are visually engaging, such as some of the action scenes, it works well enough. So that leads us to the spoiler section. And there are so many things I could stress here. I will not talk about every single plot hole in the film, every single weird decision, but there are some weird decisions, such as one scene where they're somehow holed up in this mountain where they have stockpiled all these weapons and they're firing explosive rounds inside of this confined space. But outside of it, we have tourist buses lined up and a lot of people around, and they seemingly don't hear the explosions, and they're seemingly not aware that this place that doesn't even have a gate or anything covering it, where these people are just having their base. There are so many weird decisions about it, so many plot holes where you just don't get how the writing could get to this point. And we can't really talk about the second half of the film without talking about John Connor. It turns out that his character, what happens to him in the future is that a new Skynet unit or new Skynet form integrates with it. It's sort of this material computer virus that fuses with his body and makes him cyborg, but in a different way, where he's somewhat human, but his entire form is no longer human. It's quite difficult to understand from watching the film, and I don't need it to be well explained, but there are some ways where it just doesn't make too much sense anymore because there's a humanity left in him. I think the way they explained it is that Skynet realizes the reason they always failed was that whatever they sent back in time or whatever they sent after John Connor or his family was not human. They needed something human to defeat humans. So they created this thing. I have no idea how it works because it integrates with him and then completely transforms him, so there's nothing human left in him, not even his skin, it's all robot, but he's somehow still preserved. He doesn't even seem to have a brain anymore, because then it would have been very easy to kill if he had a brain. But no, he doesn't have a brain anymore, but he's somehow still human, even though he's completely possessed by some, I don't know, microfiber robotics. I'm not sure how to explain it. It looks quite cool in a way when he's shot and he regenerates himself and he rematerializes himself with these things binding and reconstructing in his hand and everything. Visually, it looks kind of cool, but I have no idea how it's meant to work. Does it really matter? It only matters because he's supposedly still human. And I don't understand how that works. I will double check and triple check and do a lot of reading, and I will correct myself if it's actually well explained. For now, if nothing else is added, no, it's not well explained, and it's something you just have to accept. That doesn't make sense about the film. But yes, he's still human, and his sole motivation is that Skynet wins and creates this new future. He never explains, or never really properly explains, why Skynet needs to win, why Skynet is humanity's only hope, or rather, the only hope for the globe. The thing is, he needs to explain it because he is still human. He goes back in time to Sarah Connor, to Kyle Reese, to offer them protection so they will survive the future war and they can be a family in the future. So John Connor, at least if that's sincere, and there's nothing about the film that tells you that he's not sincere, he gets completely confused when they don't accept that. He thought they would be smarter. He thought that they would realize how good a deal this is to create a family in the future together. That's the best way for humanity, that Skynet needs to win and they need to create a future. So if his humanity remained, his humanity apparently is quite stupid, because then it would understand why this would not be accepted. It is a major plot hole, this whole decision to create him somewhat human and then half human, half Skynet or whatever it is. It looks really good on paper, but the execution is quite terrible. That's why I think I really don't like his character. His character is one of the biggest issues with the film, but the ideas behind it are good, and his performance is good enough. It's really weird. Don't think it really fits in a Terminator movie, but his performance is not bad. It's just off in a way, because he does play this sort of Joffrey-like character that's quite menacing and smirking all the time, but also has some humanity, even though it doesn't make sense for the character. But anyway, he has been sent back in time to build Skynet. He's basically the one who sells Skynet all the technological knowledge they need. We see them create T-1000 models, or at least early stages of T-1000 models. He's the one who's prepping them, who's giving them all the knowledge they need to build Skynet into the deadly machine it will be in the future war, so they can win the future war. And he's also, of course, designed it so that he can launch the nuclear apocalypse. And I actually can see how that would work on paper. Why it would be a decent idea for Skynet to do that, to send someone back in time that actually can change the future for the better for them. It makes a whole lot of sense. That actually is a really, really good idea, I guess. It's just the execution that's lacking a bit. The last action set piece, well, there are several action set pieces towards the end, where we see our heroes go to the office in San Francisco, trying to take them down, while he is using all the forces at his disposal to try and destroy them. They attack Golden Gate Bridge, blow big holes in it. We have some helicopter fights that are sort of decent, that look sort of interesting, with Arnold Schwarzenegger jumping out of a helicopter saying, "I'll be back," and just flying to latch onto another helicopter. And it's really ridiculous. The CGI here is not stellar, so aside from that, it is actually a decent action scene, but there's something about it that doesn't work that well. It wasn't that visually engaging. I think, again, the lack of physicality and materiality is why I didn't like it that much. And that becomes even more of a problem in the final showdown between John Connor and our heroes. The previous Terminator movies, the new hostile threat they encounter is progressively more difficult to take out. And they really need to figure out how they can destroy him, because he's not completely immaterial like the T-1000. He still is bound to some material shape that is John Connor. He can't transform into other things. Again, how it works, I don't understand, but that's at least the rules. But he's still pretty much invincible, and he does have some transformative powers. Actually, we see later, I don't know why he didn't use them early in the film, but later he actually does have them, so inconsistency, I don't know why it's there, but it is. And he's very powerful, very difficult to fight, and of course they have this whole thing of him facing off against the T-800, and they fight him in the vacant halls of Skynet. Another very big issue with the movie about the ending: how can they have these big shootouts in San Francisco? How can they infiltrate this big facility and start putting up bombs without any law enforcement, without any military showing up? It's really, there are no people around. It makes no sense. You have to suspend your disbelief so much towards the ending, and I think that's also why I lost my immersion. The final fight is so immaterial, but it's also still not too bad. It's just not that interesting. Just blue light, and it's too sci-fi, too CGI to really be that interesting. The finale just really demonstrates how bad the writing is. After defeating everything, Kyle Reese, Sarah Connor, and the T-800 go on a little trip to visit the young Kyle Reese. At this point, they have won. There will be no future war, at least for now. That seems to be the conclusion. But I guess they need to prepare for a future war anyway, and also to give the information he gives himself, that if the information wasn't given to himself as a child, he wouldn't know it in the future, so he couldn't go back, and yeah. Dilemmas. They go to this 12-year-old kid who's playing with his bicycle and tells him, talks to him, "It's really important you remember this. These are two strangers." Also, where is his parents? If two strangers came up to my child like that, I would probably intervene. And this child just, "Of course, I'll believe you. I'll remember everything that's going on here. And you seem like good people, and I smile, and everything is fine. And of course, I'll trust everything you say and remember everything. And this will not just be a weird moment that I'll forget the next day because I'm a child that is playing with my bicycle." The writing is bad. The writing is really bad. Another good example of how bad the writing is, and that's the first time I wrote it down in my notes, when Sarah Connor saves Kyle Reese. She's very quick to show him that there's a T-800 model, Arnold Schwarzenegger, in the truck with them. She shows him before warning him, saying, "Hey, there is this T-800. I have a history with him. He saved me as a child. He has saved me all this way. He can be trusted." Maybe they would have a discussion about it. Instead of telling him and preparing him for what he's about to see, she just shows him. And of course, that prompts Kyle Reese to try and kill him. And of all the preparation, of all the knowledge they should have at this point, of everything they have been doing to prepare for the future and to prepare for the arrival of Kyle Reese, they should have thought about this a bit more. I just hate heightened tension for the sake of heightened tension when it's so easy to read your way out of it. Don't create these very convenient ways to create stupid tension and conflict when you could have, logically, the people themselves could have much more easily handled, much better handled. And that is a really good demonstration of it. That scene was just bad. So the first 40 minutes of the film are not amazing. The first 40 minutes of the film are not without their problems, but I like them.
Remember, Genisys is Skynet.
That leads me to the conclusion. Terminator Genisys is entertaining enough. It is a decent action flick where towards the end it becomes a bit too CGI filled, and the conflicts, the battles, they are lacking the physicality I like. Everything seems a bit superficial. The plot gets a bit too silly and too convoluted at the same time. Too many plot holes, too many problems with some of the performances, with some of the characters, that I just wasn't too immersed in it, that I lost interest about an hour into the film, especially an hour 30 minutes into the film. I will say, even in the scenes where I was a bit zoned out, there were positive things to say about it. Some of the action was good, some of the lines were good, some of the deliveries were good. It's not an awful movie, it's not an amazing movie, but I was overall entertained. I think this is the best film after the first two movies. It's definitely better than Salvation, and I would also say it's better than Terminator 3. I would even say that it's actually a good enough movie. It might be a bit too long, it has some issues, but I think it's a film you could just enjoy. I don't think it deserves the rep it has. They are a bit ridiculous in my opinion. I was expecting something much worse going into this, and I was surprised it was this watchable and even enjoyable. I had a good time. Towards the end, Not so much, but I was never completely lost. I never hated the movie. I was never too annoyed with the movie. I was annoyed with the writing. The writing sucks, but... So I hope you enjoyed my review of Terminator Genisys. I will, of course, finish my videos on the Terminator franchise. There's only one more movie to cover, then there's the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and also, although I have filmed it, I think it will not be out yet, there will be my review of Terminator Resistance. So there are 3 more movies in the making. I'll probably also make, which I don't know if is relevant for you watching this, but I'll probably make a spoiler-free rundown of the entire franchise, what's recommendable, what's not, after I'm done with this, because once I'm done with this, it will be taking years from when I started it to when I finished it. And I just look forward to going back to some more different franchises, some different ideas. And if you like what you saw here, you can subscribe, you can comment. I like to hear your comments, especially if you also thought that Terminator Genisys was not a terrible film. Or if you want to explain to me why it is terrible. Again, I actually gave you some reasons why it's terrible. But I just liked the positives more than the negatives. So yeah, you can ring the bell button or tick the bell button. And I just hope you have a good time and that you will be coming with me if you want to live. Yeah, bye. I think even in my notes I put down Gene Simmons.